Good afternoon to our viewers in Europe and good morning to our viewers in the United States. I'm Steve Sokol and I'm the president of the American Council on Germany. Thanks so much for joining us for this conversation about investigative journalism with award-winning lead investigative journalist at Stern Investigativ. Manka Heise has been with Stern Investigativ for about 2 years, so before it was formally launched in September of 2023, but she has a long history of working on investigative pieces that address political and social issues. Manka, herzlich willkommen. It's great to have you with us today.
Thanks for having me, Stephen.
So let me start with an easy question. How did you first get involved in the field of investigative reporting?
I think maybe I was just born that way because first I started with the news and then I just got interested in political matters and just looking deeper into everything. So mainly when you have a headline or something, when you just look deeper into it, it always starts to be investigative. And I think that's what we did and what I did and what I really liked, that we really looked deeper into things.
So looking deeper and asking questions, right? That's undoubtedly something that contributed to it, that you were very curious. But what's also really interesting about the platform that you now are working with, Stern Investigativ, is that it's a cross-media format that was started by RTL Deutschland. If I understand it correctly, when a story is released in one media format, it's released in others as well. So not just a television show, but also print, websites, and even a podcast. Can you talk a little bit about sort of this multimedia format and how that works to your advantage?
Well, when I used to start for the public TV channel ZDF. And so when we started to work for RTL and Stern, that was something what we really wanted to do, that you can work for, you make a documentary for TV, you can also produce a podcast, you go on printed online articles, then a printed magazine. I mean, this is a full load of information you can just put out there, basically. And also, when you have complex subjects, like, for example, Tesla, what we might be talking about later, but which have so many different angles to look at, it's amazingly good that you can write an article and focus on something different than, for example, looking at the documentary. And then you have the podcast and you have far more time to talk about things. I mean, when you do a podcast, you have at least 2, 3, 4, 5 hours to actually go even behind the scenes. And so that was something what we really wanted to do and what we are now able to do, which is very amazing and is working very well. And so I'm happy to do this now. Yeah.
It's really interesting when you think about it, as the consumer of news and information. There are obviously different formats, right? I mean, I can watch something on television and see a report, even if it's an in-depth report. It's often missing some of the details, but I have images that I can look at. I don't see those images if I'm reading a newspaper article, even if there are a couple of photographs. And of course, in the podcast, you can also expand the focus by providing some background and some of the framing, some of the how-to in certain senses. So I think this is a really exciting platform to be part of. And of course, the first big story that you and your colleague Christian Esser broke on Stern Investigativ was about Tesla and the plant in Grünheide in Brandenburg. But this was building on work that you had already done at ZDF. So I would like to talk in a little bit more detail about the two big stories that you've been working on in recent years and months, and spend a little bit of time talking about the Tesla story first, and then a more recent piece that came out about the Charité, the big hospital in Berlin. But let's start with Tesla, because Tesla has consumed your time for quite a while now. As I mentioned,
Yes.
in March of 2021, you had a big piece on ZDF, Turbo Tempo Tesla, Elon Musk in Brandenburg. It sounds just as good in English as it does in German. Um, and then you had an updated story about Tesla in September of 2023 inside Tesla. And this is a story that has not let you go and that you've been following since then. Can you talk a little bit about sort of what drew you to this story and to the plant in Brandenburg, which was touted as a very positive thing by many politicians and community leaders as a way of creating jobs, focusing on e-mobility, helping build up a structurally weak area in Brandenburg. And yet your reporting uncovered a couple of different elements that really need to be explored further.
Yeah, when we started for the ZDF, it was, I remember it very well, that Elon Musk just said I think he got the goldenes Lenkrad. It's like a
The
prize
gold, the steering wheel.
golden steering wheel. It's from a yellow, well, I got to say yellow press. It's also the Springer Presse reporting about cars. And he went there and then he just said, by the way, I'm going to have a plant in Europe. By the way, it's going to be near Berlin. I think that was the end of 2019. And everybody went crazy because nobody expected to, like Elon Musk, one of the richest men in the world, come to Brandenburg. Yeah. And so everybody got very excited. And that's what I mean, like breaking down a headline, So what does that mean? I didn't have any idea what this could mean. Yeah. So what we did was just like going into this area, talking to the people. Everybody was very enthusiastic. But also there was like a little bit of concern about the water because it's one of the driest areas in Germany. And so there were already little rumors, I gotta say. It wasn't very big that people said, but we don't have enough water to give away, basically. It's limited. And people were just laughing it off and saying, it's so important that we have people and working places here, even though the unemployment rate is only about 5%. But still the dream of like having the e-mobility in Brandenburg, it was a big thing. And also, yes, there is an issue of young people moving away and saying, hey, maybe then they stay in this area. It was something, we were really excited about as well. And also, I personally thought the thought of having California Dream Boys or California boys, being, you
Mhm.
know, just like very, I don't know, positive. And, you have this picture of this California people in your head coming to Brandenburg, which is like former East Germany. It's a bit rural, has a lot of nature. I thought that was very charming, to be honest. I thought it's great. And the first thing I had in mind was, I don't know if you have seen the documentary, it was on Netflix, American Factory, which was actually produced by Barack Obama. And it's
Okay.
and it's about like Chinese people going to Detroit, building windshields. And so I thought, wow, this culture clash of like Chinese people in America, maybe we can do the same thing here in Germany. The Americans, like California people, coming to Brandenburg, because what I expected was like a big chunk of bureaucracy that's not going to be as fast happening as maybe the Americans wanted it to happen. So that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to do a really easy report, just like, go and walk by and just like, let the camera roll. And very quickly we discovered that there's more to it, that like the water issue is a very big one. And then also they wanted, well, they did that in the end, it's a water protected area they built the factory on.
Hmm.
So, the well, they get the water out for like, I don't know, it's 170,000 people is running underneath the Tesla factory. So, of course, what we did, the first thing you do as a journalist is you look at the reporting in America and what happened in Fremont. And I talked to former workers in Fremont and I talked to journalists. And actually, and that was kind of frightening, they said, this is the most intransparent factory you can imagine. Tesla is not talking to people and they don't like journalists, so you really have to be careful. And that was something I didn't expect. I was like, that is so strange that like
Hmm.
other journalists are warning me to report on Tesla because, in Germany we don't, I'm not scared to report on anything basically. So that's what we did. And then we just realized that like really great journalists reported on the working issues, on environmental problems. And we kind of thought, we really hope this is not going to happen in Germany. Also, that you don't want to have that the working rights are not very well. So yeah, and then we discovered, okay, it's not fine in America. Maybe it's going to be different in Germany. But then we soon realized that it's actually, yeah, as bad as in America, basically, and that we had similar issues, also environmental issues, and also already when they started to build the factory. Just as a
Hmm.
matter of fact, building on a water protected area is pretty, I mean, I don't know if anybody else could actually do that at that point. And that, yeah, was our first.
So I guess part of the question that I have is why was this allowed to happen if
Mm.
the land that the factory was built on was a protected area? Presumably there could have been another site that could have been used that would not have been protected. So it's
Absolutely.
not just the will, of the business, in this case Tesla, but also of politicians undoubtedly who, wanted to have this site at this location.
I think they looked at other sites in Germany, definitely. That's what they told us. But what they also did was they charted, and that's what we also told in the first documentary. They charted an Antonov, like an old Russian plane. And they said, look, get into this plane. And then we're just going to show you, how beautiful it is. And of
Hmm.
course, when you go up into there in Grünheide, you can see Berlin, and it's really near, really
Right.
nearby. And you have Schönefeld, the airport.
Airport.
So, it's cool. It's just cool to be near Berlin and to have this factory and all this nature. And so Elon Musk was actually arguing with the politicians because they wanted it that the Tesla factory is called Tesla Factory Brandenburg. And Elon Musk said, no, it's going to be called Tesla Factory Berlin. And then, so this is all part of the deal. And of course, it's charming to be near Berlin because Berlin is a charming city, definitely. BMW, and a very long time ago, wanted to have this piece of land as well. They drew back. We don't know quite why.
Hmm.
Could have been, it wasn't a water protected area then, but it's also built. I mean, the factory is built on sand, which is also a problem, basically. But yeah, so I think it's just more like also like the image of
Hmm.
being in Berlin. I think that was definitely something.
So Elon Musk was not happy with the reporting that you did in 2021. But that didn't stop you. You continued to follow the story. And then, of course, you had this other big report that came out in September 2023, so a little over a year ago. Um, One of the reasons why I was interested in contacting you a few months ago to talk was related to the state elections in Brandenburg. And you're somebody who has been out and about talking to people in Brandenburg, and I thought that you might have a sense of how people are thinking politically as well. There are a bunch of questions wrapped up in there, and I guess the first one is, as you fast forward to last fall and
Mm.
the piece inside Tesla, um, there the story was less about the site of the plant, but had more to do with working conditions at the plant and some of the concerns that people who are living in the town of Grünheide have. I think one of the issues was not as many jobs ended up being created as many people thought that there would be. Can you talk a little bit about how you got inside Tesla and some of the elements that you covered in that report, and then we can come back to sort of the political dimension a little bit later.
Yeah, I mean, the political dimension is very, very important because, you know, politicians from all over every party were very excited to have Elon Musk and did selfies with him. So yeah, we went inside because we had this list of how many ambulances per day were going there every day. You know, so we had like reports on like one day finger chopped off, forklift hitting a man, I don't know, wood falling from the sky 4 meters, you know, from the air on the head, all this kind of stuff. When you went by the factory, you could see the helicopter landing there. Like, just, I mean, I didn't even go there that often, but I always saw like helicopters, ambulances, all this kind of stuff. And this was very similar to what happened in Fremont, basically, you know. And so then we asked the authorities, how often does actually somebody go there? And their numbers from the authorities were so much lower. And we were like, that is so odd. You know, we have the lists of what's happening there, and the authorities, they literally just told us, you know, there was a man stung by a bee instead of telling us what was really going on. So
Oh,
that was
wow.
very strange. And then we, of course, had witnesses. And when you go undercover into a factory, you must have proof. It's not that you can just say, hey, let's see what's going to happen there if we find something. You really must do have proof. That is very, very important. And we do actually have lawyers. We need to, you know, we need to talk back to them. We need to tell them what kind of proof we have. And then it's a, you know, huge decision if it's okay to go into, you know, a working place, into this building with a hidden camera, basically. But the evidence was so big that we were allowed to get in, and it was pretty easy because at that time, Tesla was just hiring anybody. You know, you didn't even had to have a lot of work experience. They were
Hmm.
just taking anybody, basically. And so we didn't even decided to go where we wanted to go and which part of the factory. We just randomly went in there. And one was in the area of the paint shop, and the other one, I forgot, in the drive unit. That's right. And so, like, even the first day, they came back, and they had no instruction on safety, like nothing. And they were so exhausted because it's so loud, and it's, you know, so that's how we went in there, basically. And we could just see every day something happening. Like, you know, there's like this one picture in the documentary, like, our reporter wants to go to her working place, and water is just dripping down like crazy from the ceiling.
Yeah.
And she says, "What's happening?" And somebody says, "Well, you know, somebody with a forklift was just hitting against some pipes." And so it's like it was just like every day something going on. And yeah, and it was a very difficult decision, to be honest, because on the one hand, me as a reporter, I know that something bad is going on. I cannot go in there because I was already too well known. And so, yeah, we had to talk with our reporters who went undercover very closely. I mean, you know, when we waved them off in the morning and when they came back after work, we always had to stay in touch with them if they're okay, because it was also a risk for them, obviously, you know.
Yeah,
Um,
very dangerous environment for them to be in.
Very dangerous environment, you know, and later we even found out that just like working there in some parts of the factory is so bad for your lungs and for your system because there's aluminum dust in the air, you know, which can cause lung cancer. And so yeah, it was, you know, if we at some point we just had to take one reporter out there because she was so exhausted, you know, and she just had to be on a break. And yeah, it was a very difficult decision, but on the other hand, it was so important that we had this kind of proof. And What we also did was there's this thing of Freedom of Information Act is when you can ask the authorities
Hmm.
what is going on, if they really do have like control the working conditions and the environmental things, and they have to give you just the papers out of the authorities, basically, you know? And so we could prove that all the authorities in Brandenburg knew about the working conditions. We had
Hmm.
it on paper. So it was not only us going there with our cameras, seeing what we were seeing, it was also that we had, well, like a very good proof that politicians, even in the ministries, knew what was going on.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it was good
Well,
for
and
us,
and
but it's
so
a bad
did
thing, yeah.
did this reporting in September have any sort of impact to change things?
Well, that is a very difficult question. I think when you ask me, I think it was very, very important for the workers that they were being listened to, basically. I think that's why quite a lot of people actually talk to us because of course they're scared. I can't blame them. They have to sign NDAs. They can lose everything by talking to a journalist, which is
Hmm.
also very special that a company does that, basically. So we were meeting people in the middle of the night, in the middle of nowhere, but they had this urge to talk to us. And it was so we had like proof on the workers who worked there. So yeah, I think one important thing was that people could talk to us. And then we also went to court because, people were already suing Tesla because they were just like being fired really quickly. And so we had one guy who actually was brave enough to go in front of the camera with his full name, with his face, talking to us. And and I said to him, look, you have to think about this, if you really want to do this, because you know what Tesla can do. And he said, look, I have nothing to lose. I'm going to court anyway, because kind of he wanted his job back, but on the other hand,
Yeah.
he wanted money back. And he had an electric, what's it called? He had to do some work he wasn't supposed to be doing, and he got like an electric shock, basically. And his heart felt really bad, and I mean, you could theoretically die of that, basically. So
Wow.
he talked to us, and he then got a lot of money from the court, basically. Um, and Tesla had to pay him a lot of money, and he got a new job by just being very brave and being outspoken. So this might just be a little thing, but I think this also counts. So the working conditions basically didn't improve much when we talked to people.
Hmm.
My theory is, and that's what I strongly believe, is because, I mean, you can blame Tesla for that, but I also blame the politicians for that and the authorities because they still don't, control the factory as much as they should be doing, basically.
Well, and this was even in the press more recently. In May, a group of climate activists tried to storm the plant. That's obviously happened since your last big report, but as you mentioned before we went live today, you just had another piece about Tesla come out today. So this is obviously a story that you're following very, very closely. Um, do you feel like your awareness campaign, for lack of a better word, is creating positive change? I mean, obviously there are certain individuals, institutions that are responsible, right? The company's responsible, the authorities carry some responsibility, some of the politicians. But do you feel that making people more aware of what's actually happening um, is also changing behavior, or not really?
I wish.
Yeah.
I just sometimes think, or I have the feeling that 10 years ago, maybe even politicians had to step back. If you had found out that, authorities don't control a plant, which obviously has not the best working conditions, but no, this didn't happen. But what I also find important still is that we look at things that politicians, mayors, all kind of people know that we are looking at this matter, that they cannot do, I mean, they were still going to do a lot behind closed doors, but quite a few times we know what they're doing. And all I can do, that was what I was just talking about recently with another colleague, is that we can just put it into the open and, that people know what's happening. I think that's also our job. And I do also get phone calls from people living there who are just happy to be heard,
Yeah.
because that is also something like, do you believe in the media who is also responsible for what kind of reporting they do and just sticking to one topic and listening to them? I mean,
Yeah.
that is something really, really important. And I mean, this is maybe the signal we can give, and that we look into things and that politicians don't feel too safe doing these things behind closed doors. I mean, that is what we're doing, and sometimes something happens,
Yeah.
but I think that is like why I'm doing it still.
Well, I want to come back to the political dimension in Brandenburg, and the recent election. On the 22nd of September, there was a state election in Brandenburg. It was the third of three state elections in Eastern Germany. And in this case, the Social Democrats won the election with 31% of the vote, but the far right Alternative for Germany, AfD, was a very close second with over 29% of the vote. So a third of the vote went to the AfD. And the new party, the Bündnis Sarah Wagenknecht, or the Sarah Wagenknecht Alliance, had nearly 14% of the vote. So already you see these huge extreme, the lot of votes going to the extremes, right? Far right a third, far left almost 14% of the vote. Were you surprised by these results, given all of the conversations that you had been having with people in Brandenburg?
Mm. Well, no, I wasn't really surprised. I mean, what you have to understand is, and that's why I'm still on this Tesla topic, okay? Because everything what's happening with Tesla is sort of what's also happening in the wide open, and like, because like the Ministry of Environment is run by a green, or was run by a green politician. No, we don't know, but it's like
At the state level.
yeah,
Yeah.
from Green Party. He is the one who had to wave the factory through, to say that it can be built and everything. So I personally thought, this really surprises me that the Green Party is okay to build this kind of factory on a water protected area. It's okay to chop off so many trees and to compromise so much of the environment, basically. Then there are the Social Democrats, like the local prime minister is a Social Democrat, also the Minister for Economics, who is so proud that he knows Elon Musk personally.
Mhm.
So I mean, the Social Democrats is totally a party for working rights, basically. So I was surprised that the Social Democrats have like so compromised so much in working conditions.
Mhm.
It's okay. I do understand they want more industry in this area, and they want to have working places. But what kind of working places do we get? So what was happening when I was out there, and they were talking about like the plant has to be even bigger and everything. So there are all these politicians from the Green Party, the Social Democrats, and everybody. And so all they say is, we must have this plant no matter what. It's a political will to have this plant. That's what they
Mhm.
said to the population there all the time, and they wouldn't go back and say, we're going to explain you how that works. I mean,
Mhm.
I had situations with the Minister of Economics. Honestly, he said, you guys, you don't know how lucky you are that this plant is here. So I sometimes had the feeling he didn't even try to understand the concerns of the population there.
Mhm.
So what happened was there were people from the far right, in the audience, and so they were asking all the questions, which I honestly have to say had to be asked about the
Mhm.
environment, about the working conditions. And so the parties who are in charge made it really easy for these parties just to ask these questions,
Mhm.
because when you want something so bad that you don't allow any other thought, then all of the sudden these kind of parties can ask this kind of questions. And the far right, is not interested into environmental rights or in working rights or anything, but it's just like, it's very populistic and it worked. And that Wojtke, the prime minister, was elected again was also that the people in Brandenburg then finally said, we want everything, but we don't want the far right to have too much power. So what happened was everybody voted then for the Social Democrats, but he has nobody else he can do a coalition with. And
Mhm.
Bündnis Sarah Wagenknecht, we don't know much about it, to be honest. Nobody knows. Also with Tesla, you don't know what they stand for really. And so you still have this kind of, I don't know, it's a very difficult situation basically, because you don't really know what's going to happen. But
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest problems is that you don't listen enough to the people and their voices and their concerns. I mean, that's what I experienced at the Tesla factory. And that worries me. That really does.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting to hear you say that many of these political decisions were made with big compromises in mind on labor issues
Yeah,
for the Social Democrats, on the environment for the Greens, because this was an important plant to have. But I'm also sort of wondering about the lives of the people that lived in Grünheide, because when the plant was coming in, this was expected to be something positive in terms of bringing business to the town, creating jobs for people in the town, helping, revive the economy in the town of Grünheide. How has that sort of unfolded? How do people in Grünheide now feel about having the Tesla plant right there?
that is difficult to say. I think, I mean, I have to admit, I'm talking mainly to the people who are concerned, because what the quality of air is, what does it mean for the school, which is just a kilometer nearby. All I know is that housing is very, very expensive now because
Mhm.
of the Tesla plant. So that makes it also a bit complicated for people. There might be quite a few people who really like it. I don't know. But the people I met, and mainly the people who actually lived there or why they moved there, was because of environmental things. I
Yeah.
did a family nearby who said, now we're worried that we cannot drink the water out of the tap anymore, and they started crying. So I think that is real, and you have to think about that. And yeah, but it's very difficult to find common sense,
Mhm.
even, and I'm not talking about ministers in Brandenburg, I'm also talking about the mayors, because it's all now on this municipal
Yeah.
grounds, basically, and it's very big decisions this mayors have to do. And well, they tell me they're doing it. They also have, the people who live there in mind. I can, I don't know if they really do, to be honest.
Yeah. When you were talking about the working conditions before, one of our viewers wrote in, doesn't Germany have an agency like the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or OSHA, and safety regulations? And I think this goes to, yes, there are strict rules and regulations, but you were saying that the authorities are not necessarily enforcing all of these things.
Absolutely. It's the Ministry of Health. They have an authority which needs to look at the working conditions there, basically, and they need to control it. That's what I said. We use the Information Act to see what this authority, which basically has to control the working conditions, what they knew, what they controlled, what they saw, and what happened, basically. And so they knew that it was dangerous. They knew that there was, I mean, they talked about substances which cause cancer. They
Hmm.
knew that this was floating around. Um, did they do anything? Maybe now, I don't know,
Hmm.
but at the time they didn't. Did they control it enough? I don't think so. People were telling us in the factory that they knew when the people were coming from the authorities, so they cleaned all the space or stopped the engines so that not much stuff is flowing in the air. So that's why what I mean when I say it's really politically wanted. They didn't, for me, it seems like they didn't want to find anything. And the
Hmm.
Minister for Health, I mean, we asked her, I asked Frau Nonnemacher, so you knew about the working conditions. I mean, she got an email from her authority telling her that, this person was upset because Tesla didn't respond to anything. And she just said to me, go away, not talking to me.
Hmm.
That is something which yes, I do find it concerning that the authorities did look the other way. I mean, this is what we experienced back then. Maybe everything changed, not from what the people are telling us, but I don't have now the current papers. But from 1 year ago, yes, authorities knew and didn't do much about it.
So let's switch gears and go to the other story. Obviously, we could talk about Tesla for much longer, but I really want to talk about Inside Charité, which is the most recent piece that you and a team of other journalists have brought to light. It's an investigation into, one could say, certainly Berlin's, if not Germany's, or one of Berlin, certainly Berlin's and one of Germany's most famous hospitals. This was an investigation that was conducted over 6 months to try to look at some of
More.
the
Mm.
longer
nine
some of
months,
the
even,
some of
yeah.
the practices in the hospital. And you and your colleagues had some pretty startling discoveries that were just released at the end of September. So can you talk a little bit about this story and what you found?
Well, also then we needed to have, I mean, I start differently. The Charité is I would even say one of the famous hospitals in the world because even Newsweek said, okay, it's the sixth best hospital in the world.
Mhm.
Um, you know, you can say who's reading Newsweek, but we were like, okay, so the Charité is definitely internationally known. And it means a lot for Berlin because people from everywhere do come to Charité. And I don't have a doubt that there are also very fantastic doctors, nurses, and that, their research on things is amazing and that they did a really, really good job during Corona times. Um, but still, we looked more into it because we knew that medicine students were in charge of like diagnose patients, which is, you definitely can't do this. And they did it because the doctors do operations, and the doctors do operations because you earn money with that. That's like, the way how you earn money in a hospital. And back then in April, I remember going to a demonstration, and there were a lot of doctors on the streets from the Charité. And I looked into their really, really tired eyes, and they said, "Look, under these conditions, we cannot work anymore. I'm very scared that I cannot treat my patients right because I'm working so many hours. It's mainly I'm by myself. Like at the emergency room, they were saying that one or two doctors were treating 60 patients a night sometimes, and they were like, I feel like the second victim. First off, I might not treat a patient right. And then there's me because I need to blame myself that I
Mhm.
didn't treat the patient right. So
Mhm.
that was reason enough to actually go in there. And also here, I mean, we had the evidence, we talked to people, and then we pretty randomly went in there. It was It's about we went in as nursing interns basically,
Hmm.
and so we could just see everything. And also here, like from day one, we could just see what was happening. And we saw that there were no doctors, because they were all like operating patients. And the nurses were trying their best, to comfort the patients and to treat them right. And then there were medicine students who also tried to diagnose people, and that was also very scary to see.
Hmm. Um, how was this story received when it came out?
I gotta say, pretty much similar to Tesla. Also, we have, I mean, it's the Charité said, no, it's not a pattern. It's just like, it was just us being there for so long, just really searching for this thing to happen. Also, what they always say is, as doing this undercover reporting has like this problem of like either you just have witnesses and they say, yeah, but this witness could be compromised, and they
Hmm.
just tell you what you ever want to hear, or you actually catch something with a hidden camera and then they say morally and ethically you cannot be doing this. So
Hmm.
that's what the Charité blamed us for. And I do take this seriously. I really, really do. But on the other hand, I just thought it's so important that kids were not treated like kids with cancer were not treated right,
Hmm.
and like they hadn't seen doctors for days and days and days because they were on the wrong station, in the I just think, yes, people need to see so that the hospital cannot say, well, no, this is not happening with us. And look, on the paper, we do have enough doctors. No, the reality is that even kids are not treated well enough,
Hmm.
basically. And so, yeah, even when you say morally, it's difficult. I just believe that it was very important that it's out there. And I find it, I mean, yes, politicians said something because the Charité is owned by the city, basically,
Hmm.
100%. Yeah, but this is the problem also because then politicians are also involved and then they don't want to admit that there are mistakes. And also the system is so big that basically everybody said something, but I didn't see any big change yet. I mean, it hasn't been long enough that we can say something big has happened, but you basically need, then it must be such a big change,
Hmm.
how, I mean, also in like the decision, do you want to earn money by healing people, for example?
Right.
This is what you want to have as a society, basically. And this is what's happening. And if you have this decision that a hospital needs to earn money, that's what you get, basically.
Right. I mean, I guess there's another element to this in terms of the response. It's obviously too soon to see a response from the hospital. There's certainly been pushback from the Charité against the reports that were released. Um, but the other kind of response that I'm interested in hearing about to both stories is the public reception. What do you hear from viewers, from readers, from podcast listeners in terms of these kinds of stories that you uncover and the reactions to them?
We got lots and lots and lots emails, like loads. And mainly, I mean, of course, I have to honestly say, there were quite a few who said, look, this is, the charity helped me, so it's fine. But we got from ex-nurses, ex-doctors, ex-patients who said, yes, this is exactly what I experienced. And again, it's like this thing that we give a voice to these people, and that it's not just like what happened to them. No, it's a system basically. It's
Mhm.
it's that's what's happening. And we had numbers that actually people are dying from this lack of doctors in
Mhm.
time. It's like an issue. It really is. But so that is the first step, just to acknowledge that you have this problem. But
Mhm.
you also need like the big politics in it, to make a decision how to change it. And I'm not sure if that's going to happen, to be honest.
Yeah. I mean, have you also gotten hate mail, right? I mean, messages from people. No. Okay.
Mm-mm.
Um,
Not
because
with the Charité. I mean, with Tesla, it's different. I mean, not with, interestingly enough, not with the second documentary. The first one, yes, there was a storm, basically, and even Elon Musk tweeted, shame on us and everything. But no, with Charité, we didn't get any hate mails. No, it was mainly, I mean, yeah, maybe a doctor might have said, but it was very, very, only a few who said, look, this is, they also helped or they're trying to help, of course. But mainly, no, people relieved that, that they knew that that's the fail of the system and that
Mhm.
they were part of it, that it was not only bad luck, but it's also what's happening basically,
Mhm. So these are two really big stories, right? And undoubtedly it's a pretty large team that
Mm.
you work with to try to do this. You have people who actually are able to go undercover. You're not always able to do that because you're well known. Um, the positions might, be different, but I'd be really interested in hearing sort of what some of the most challenging elements are of conducting this kind of of an investigation.
This is like really going into the work of a journalist, and it's honestly how you approach a story and how you talk to people. There is a big, big difference. How the printing people, like the people who work for a printed article and the people who work for TV, we work very differently. We have the same thoughts,
Mhm.
but it's a different approach. And we were openly talking about it again and again. Also, as a big team, you have to do really big decisions, because sometimes the people who work for the printed magazine, they do need different information than we need.
Mhm.
So it's like we have like a meeting every day to keep us updated. It's so much organization that like there's a core team from print, podcast, and the TV people, and we need to talk about like every step we're doing. And it's just like, it has to be good teamwork, that it's, also like full disclosure. Nobody's allowed to talk about it. We're not available for our families. That is also
Mhm.
an issue, friends. We're not talking with them about all this. It's, I mean, now I'm used to it, but that's what we also tell our undercover people because they're pretty young. And we always tell them, hey, look, it's going to be a tough time, mainly because you cannot really talk with other people about it.
Yeah.
So, we need really a good atmosphere of trust that we talk about this, because sometimes you get angry, sometimes you're like, oh no, why is it not working the way I wanted it
Right.
to work? So you have to be transparent with each other, honest with each other. And I think we did a very good job with that. I'm very proud of that we did that so well. Yeah.
I mean, another piece to this is investigative journalism requires meticulous research, right? You
Mm.
need to do a lot of research, a lot of fact checking to make sure that the information that you have is absolutely correct. Um, how do you how do you make sure that that's the case when sometimes you're using where you're not able to see something yourself, in fact, but you're using somebody's testimony or somebody's statement?
Well, we have so many people who look over our pieces, you would not believe it. And it takes up weeks to actually fact check all our work. And we have a unit who is looking through the text from the podcast, from our documentary, and the articles. I mean, these are people who are working on this. They do like this verification, and then we have people who go through every sentence, and we need to prove every sentence we write down. We need to have a proof to this, either papers, either I don't know what people have said, contracts. all this kind of stuff. So
Hmm.
when you look at our articles, and well, you can't, but if you look at it, you're at the site, you have like all proofs. We have big folders of just proofs, somebody else independently goes through to see that we're doing the right thing. And that is
Hmm.
also, I mean, to be honest, it sucks. It's so much work, but it's so important that we do it. And I'm so glad that we do have these colleagues and this time who do that because it's really so much work. Yeah.
Well, and I mean, you mentioned earlier having to have lawyers involved in
Mm.
this as
They
well, and
look
I'm sure
over
that
it
that's
too. Yes.
part of it
They check it
as
too.
well.
Yeah. It's seriously, it's when you do this work, it's so many people involved who have to do their job. And the verification team and the people who look over it and the lawyers, they are so important. And we really do need them because they fact check everything we say and
Hmm.
do. Yeah.
Hmm. And then maybe lastly, obviously having your sources is incredibly important for this kind of reporting. Um, but how do you go about protecting your sources, especially in a sensitive investigation? I mean, you talked a little bit about one person at Tesla who said he didn't care. He was happy to go on
Mm.
camera and state his name because he was going to court in any case. But I'm sure that that's not a frequent occurrence, and that there are others who really want to give you information, but also want to keep their heads down and not be identified.
Yes, and that is something, I mean, I'm always surprised how we find these people, to be honest, but somehow, they spread the word basically, and then I get either phone calls or I talk to them, whatever. And when I talk to them on the phone, I mean, I don't turn up with the camera right away. It takes time to meet these people, to have coffee with them, and sometimes it takes months, to meet them, talk to them, get like the confidence like also towards me, and it's always
Mhm.
like a little bit of a date. You meet them and it's just like the chemistry has to be right. So also the informants, they have a very good sense if you mean it seriously and
Mhm.
if they can trust me. Definitely some people don't know how they want to be protected because they simply don't know. Others have a very clear idea in their mind, and it definitely takes also quite a bit of time to talk with them about like in what kind of way they can appear in a piece.
Mhm.
Definitely.
Mhm.
It's like I had people who said, look, even my wife or my husband is not allowed to know. So yes, I do take that very seriously when somebody tells me that. And so, yeah, with the Charité, for example, we did a painting about an informant. He was so scared that he said, it's not even enough that you show a different person or like just me behind a wall.
Yeah.
I want it to be a comic. And then I say, okay, that's what you want. You definitely get, I mean, I do respect that. Definitely.
Yeah.
That's what we do. Yeah.
Well, Manka, herzlichen Dank. Thank you for sharing some insights into your work and the challenges that you face doing this important work, but also the insights that you shared with us on these two big pieces, because I think that although they're very different on some levels, there is some commonality between the two of them when you think about who carries part of the responsibility or who contributes to that responsibility, the institutions themselves or the company, and then the authorities as well, and how one can increase public awareness in these important topics and have a better informed and better educated public. Because at the end of the day, that's what journalism is all about.
Definitely. Yeah. Mm.
Well, many thanks.
Thank you.
Enjoyed this conversation, and I certainly learned a lot.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Thanks for having me.